Hello, everyone. I'm Krissah Marga Taganas, an assistant professor of philosophy from the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, and a member of Women Doing Philosophy. In this lecture, I'll be discussing an introduction to feminist social and political philosophy. So here's the outline of the talk. First, we will discuss the feminist critique of the traditional social and political philosophy. Then we will identify the goals and commitments of feminist social and political philosophy. We will also look at the classic feminist political camps or schools of thought that dominated the inquiry for a time. And lastly, we'll look at the current trends and issues in feminist social and political philosophy. All right. So philosophy has become a vital arena for feminists for decades. Feminist philosophy as a field of inquiry utilizes philosophical methods and offers conceptual analysis and critiques. So basically, feminist philosophers commit to the identification of bias structures in philosophy in the society, and they also commit to the development of analysis of women's experiences that are not distorted by sexist assumptions. All right, so basically, we also start off with our experiences. So for us to be able to make sense, to make meanings from our experiences, and we also use philosophical theories and methods in trying to articulate women's issues. All right, so social and political philosophy, as we usually define, it's almost always on the focus on the exploration of questions about how people should govern themselves. So how social and political systems ought to work. And mostly they also offer standards by which to analyze and judge these social and political organizations and institutions. So social and political philosophy is mainly it examines issues concerning man, the state, and the society. So what is this feminist critique? So what is the critique of feminists in the way we do socio-political philosophy? So feminist philosophers critique the way the traditional social and political philosophy was construed. And of course, that is that there is no particular attention given to the plight of women. Okay, so basically, feminist philosophers examine gender biases in the traditional social and political institutions. Right, so we examine the social and political organization systems. Now, what are our beliefs that continue to perpetuate women's subordination? So this is what we look into when we engage in the inquiry of feminist social and political philosophy. So like in any other fields within feminist philosophy, we also start with the recognition, of course, of the long-standing problem that we have, and that is, of course, women's exclusion in the political, social, educational, and professional ambience of male productivity. Okay, so basically, feminist social and political philosophers argue that the mainstream, the traditional, social and political philosophy as an inquiry has largely ignored issues that are central to women. So almost always under the pretense of that, well, these issues are usually just so personal and private, so that they shouldn't be addressed, that they shouldn't be a concern of the political sphere. They shouldn't be a a national and political concerns, because these must be pushed to the private. So we can sum up this kind of critique, no, by the famous statement, the personal is political as a battle cry. So what do we mean by that? So of course, this is to recognize that women's issues are a result of a larger system of oppression, and that they shouldn't be just regarded as personal, as private problems. So now we look at the issues of care work, domestic work or domestic responsibilities, domestic violence, gender-based violence, issues of marriage, divorce, rape, rape culture, child rearing, etc. These issues are systemic, and that they shouldn't be looked at just individual phenomena. No? These are not just individual phenomena, and that they are just isolated incidents, experiences, but they must be looked at a consequence, a result of a larger system of oppression, that the problem is systemic. Okay, that this is distinct from any other kind of oppression. All right, and so in this argument that the personal is political, this has always been challenged by feminist philosophers throughout the years, because this distinction between the private and the public realms has served not to uphold male domination of women by the power relations that is at work. Okay, not only within the household, but of course in the society. And almost always, that when they define power relations here within the household, it's as if we just look at this as something that is natural, so that is something that is immune from political regulation. All right, and so in this sense, we can say that feminist social and political philosophy can serve as both branches of feminist philosophy and social-political philosophy. So as a branch of feminist philosophy, we can see how it will serve as a critique of the mainstream or the traditional way of doing things in social and political philosophy. So mainly on its methods, concerns, the questions they ask, and of course the woman question. So we ask issues. Now we interrogate the methods that we use in socio-political philosophy. So as a branch of social and political philosophy, so it may serve as a burgeoning field. No, it is already a developed. It still continues to grow. It's a field for developing new methods and ways of thinking about our social and political practices and values. So to sum up, here are some of the commitments of feminist social and political philosophy. So firstly, of course, we want to identify. So feminist philosophers identify oppressive structures that contribute to women's subordination. So as we mentioned, we must always interrogate. We must interrogate our social and political institutions, our practices, our values, our beliefs. What are the systems that continue to perpetuate, that continue to reinforce, and that continue to uphold male dominance? Okay, so we continue to reevaluate, we continue to counter these biases. Okay, and then in that sense, we are able to analyze women's oppression. All right, and so we want to look at it as something that is unique and not only a subset of a system, okay, of a form of oppression. We want to look at it as women's oppression. Okay, some feminist social and political philosophers believe that aside from offering critique of the methods, the concepts, and the arguments in social and political philosophy, they also believe that maybe we can extend, diba? Maybe we can expand further the arguments, not the existing arguments that we have in social and political philosophy, so as to include women's issues and concerns. So some would just offer critiques, counter these biases, articulate new ways of thinking about women's oppression. Now, some feminist social political philosophers believe that we can modify, no? That we can supply new methods, new perspectives, and we can extend and expand what is already existing here. So much that we have to articulate and include women's issues and concerns. All right. So another commitment is feminist social political philosophers reevaluate social political concepts. So we try to rethink, we try to reevaluate, reconsider the concepts of power, autonomy, concepts of hierarchy, dominance, justice. How do we make sense of justice? No, in this sense, we already know from feminist ethics, how they tried to offer a critique of the ethics of justice versus the ethics of care. So here we want to look at these concepts, and we sometimes we can also embark on the inquiry on looking at the possibilities. Now, what are the possibilities involved in considering the term political? All right. So these are vantage points, and these are the goals, the commitments, of feminist social and political philosophy. So in a sense, we try to develop ideas, methods, and ways of thinking within social and political philosophy. Okay, so the current debates and trends in feminist social and political philosophy owe so much to our foremothers, of course, the champions and the forerunners during the early years of feminism as a movement. So it is very significant that we briefly mention these efforts as historical context. So we know that this inquiry, the history of feminist social and political philosophy, they are indebted to the works of early feminists. All right, so let's look at these historical contexts. So we'll look at the three waves of feminism. So feminism came in three waves. So the first wave of feminism can be traced during the late 19th century and had Mary Wollstonecraft as the leading figure due to her groundbreaking work, A Vindication of the Rights of Women. So the main call of feminists during this wave was particularly about the call for equality. So what kind of equality? So the equality in public spaces, equality in education, in work, and civil rights. So this is the same wave that afforded us the right to vote. So this is also the suffrage movement. All right. For the second wave, so we can say that the second wave is characterized or is being characterized by the shift of the times. So these waves started around 1960s along with the influential work of Simone de Beauvoir, The Second Sex. So in her work, she challenged the concept of a woman. So de Beauvoir proposed that one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. So we can see here that the call from equality, the call for civil liberties, the legal gains, okay, it shifted to the call for the emancipation of women. And what is this emancipation? What do we mean by emancipation? Emancipation from what? All right, so emancipation from the oppressive structures, from the oppressive systems of the patriarchal society. So this emancipation was to address the existence of different women in their social classes. So it is understood that they also aim at transcendence and freedom. So we have to theorize, no, we have to, if we want to really achieve liberty, freedom, okay, we must find we must transcend ourselves. No, we must emancipate ourselves from these oppressive structures and start to define our own freedom as women. Okay, so we can see here though, that feminist solidarity was actually the goal that seeks to unify women. So women of color, white women, cisgender, and even women in developing nations. So it aimed to address the various forms of oppression that these women experience. No, so it's like recognizing the different experiences of different women. And that women's struggle was also considered a class struggle. So lastly, the third wave of feminism has more emphasis on post-colonial and postmodern thinking. So the concepts of woman, body, gender, sexuality, and heteronormativity were included in the discussion. All right, so these, third wave feminists all the more emphasize on the importance of intersectionality. So it aims to recognize the intersecting concerns and experiences of women. So in general, feminism became the movement to investigate women's oppression, subordination, marginalization, and the effects, the myriad effects to women's lives and to society as a whole. Okay, so now we can see here the roots, okay, of feminist thought, no, in these movements. So these are the political roots. All right. So feminism centrally construes the moral judgment from the perspectives of the subjugated women. So we can see here that basically the heart of the argument is that the systemic, marginalization and mistreatment, the devaluation of women, across cultures is actually a paradigmatic human harm with very grave and pervasive consequences. All right. So now let's look at the early works of social and political philosophers. Okay, so as I have already mentioned, we have Mary Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights of Women in 1795, John Stuart Mill and Harriet Taylor's The Subjection of Women, 1869, Kate Millett's Sexual Politics in 1970, Robin Morgan's Sisterhood is Powerful in 1970, Shulamit's Firestone, The Dialectic of Sex in 1971, Carol Pateman's The Sexual Contract, 1988, Susan Moller-Ocken's Justice, Gender, and the Family, 1989, and lastly, Catherine McKinnon's Toward a Feminist Theory of the State in 1989. So of course, these are just some of the early works, important and major works in our study of feminist social and political philosophy. So now let's look at some of the projects that feminist social and political philosophers, pursue. So what are the kinds of inquiry, that they pursue? So they also, of course, embark inquiry concerning family. So of course, the power relations within the family, the household, which of course was considered private before. But because of the gains of feminism as a movement and feminist thought, now we can say that this is actually a result of a larger system of oppression. So they also embark in inquiry concerning sex, sexuality, marriage, no, marriage as a social institution. How does it subordinate women? How does it promote, perpetuate, women's oppression? Housework, child rearing, and of course, no, very recent the projects on issues concerning race, gender, ethnicity, ability, and sexual orientation. So these are only some, no, of the projects that feminist social political philosophers pursue. So we see here that there is progress, no? There is continuity from activism to scholarship. We see the marriage of theory and practice. We see the commitment of putting philosophy to where social and political decisions are made. Although we acknowledge that feminism, as a movement as well as feminist philosophy, resist grand categorizations. So to be able to accommodate diversity and difference, there had been various labels and schools of thought that served as approaches, no, as perspectives in our understanding of women's experiences and oppression. So feminist philosopher Alison Jagger identified these feminist political camps, no, that dominated the inquiry for a time. The concerns, no, as we will see later on, are actually overlapping, they're intersecting, but it makes the philosophizing more enriching. All right. So the feminist political camps are liberal feminism, radical feminism, and socialist and Marxist feminism. So in brief, liberal feminists stand with the belief that the root of inequality of men and women can be traced in the unequal opportunities for them. So they're saying now, no, liberal feminists would say, okay, this can be remedied, no, through opening the same public access opportunities in education, work, and home to women. All right. So gender justice then can be attained by ensuring fair rules of the game. So we can see that the liberalism's focus is on freedom and equality. So again, we can see that liberalism's focus on freedom and equality, it concerns on the protection and enhancement of women's personal and political autonomy. All right. So radical feminists disagree. Okay. So for radical feminists, they argue that the root of these social inequalities lies in the social and cultural factors that affect the lives of women. So these inequalities exist because they are propagated and reinforced by institutions defined by power, dominance, and hierarchy. All right. So we can see here that, well, this is the patriarchal system, the male dominance, no? And the patriarchal system, so to speak, must be overthrown, okay, in order for us to fully liberate women. Radical feminists remain committed to getting at the root of male domination by, of course, looking at, understanding, and analyzing the source of power differentials. All right. So lastly, Marxist and socialist feminists, they share the same beliefs that freedom cannot be fully achieved in a class-based society. All right. So as followers of Marx, Marxist feminists claim that women's oppression can be traced by private property. So consequently, women serve as only means of production in a class-based capitalist system. So in this sense, capitalism becomes the source of women's oppression, as argued by Marxist feminists. So socialist feminists agree with the Marxist feminists that capitalism is the source of women's oppression. Okay. And with the radical feminists, that patriarchy is the source of women's oppression. So therefore, for socialist feminists, they have to kill the two systems. Now that is the capitalism and patriarchy. Okay, so now we can see that both of them stems from a macro scale perspective. All right, so due to the growing resources and discussion within feminist social political philosophy and the context that continually define our questions and concerns, feminist philosophers utilize various theories and viewpoints in articulating women's issues. And these include psychoanalytic and care theories, decolonial feminism, post-structural and postmodern feminism, bioethics. They also engage in issues of democracy and justice, human rights, critical theory, race theory, disability studies, climate change, and of course, very important, gender and development. So with all this, I think we can now say that feminist social and political philosophy is an important work in feminism and philosophy. So as long as feminists remain to think about improving women's conditions, commit to eliminating oppression and bias in institutional practices, so long as we rally, as feminists rally to accord women and other marginalized groups the rights and opportunities they rightfully deserve, then I think our fight for equality and our causes will never be in vain. So that's the end of the lecture. Again, thank you so much for listening.